It's the end of the week. There's plenty of injury updates to go through, and you know why you're here. All I ask is that you go down there, drop a like on the video, and subscribe to the channel to show your support, because I'm one of the only fantasy YouTubers who goes for defense multiple times a week. So going through our first matchup today, we've got the Jacksonville Jaguars and the New England Patriots playing this game in London here. So make sure to, again, have your matchup set up, everything in your fantasy lineup set up on Saturday night, so you do not miss this game because it's 8:30 a.m. in the morning. So I actually think the Patriots are definitely a playable defense. They were not inside my top 12 defenses that you saw earlier in the week. But what you didn't see is that the Patriots were not actually that far off. The Patriots, I actually don't think, have a terrible time here in this matchup. Look, the Jaguars, they're banged up offensively, obviously. Travis Etienne's a game time call. Gabe Davis is questionable. Like, they've got injuries offensively. So the Patriots defense, they are a banged up defense as well, though. They've got plenty of their own problems and their own injuries as well. But I actually think the Patriots, with their offense running more efficient, that it might keep the defense fresh just a little bit more and maybe give some more opportunities for a couple turnovers against a team that's not exactly totally opposed to turning the ball over to their opponent. So I like the Patriots defense as a pretty mid-end play this week. And the Jags defense, I've heard it a lot this week. Where are the Jags defense? Can you play the Jags defense? Listen, the Jags defense it's a disgrace. I mean, their defensive coordinator looks like he has no idea what he's doing. So I'm not going to act like I'm going to play them. Like, I'm just not playing the Jags defense. They're banged up as well. And the Patriots offense just simply looks better with Drake May at the helm. I'm just not playing Jacksonville's defense, even though I do think they have the matchup advantage this week. The Detroit Lions at the Minnesota Vikings this week is our next matchup, and I think the Vikings can be played 100%. Listen, this is a tough matchup. I mean, there's just no question. The over-under would indicate so, and I actually think this could be a little bit of a lower scoring week than Vegas thinks it could be. The Vikings defense has been top tier. I mean, they're averaging like 15 fantasy points per game, depending on your defensive scoring format. They've been excellent. The Vikings are so aggressive. They're not letting anybody run on them. They're not letting anybody really throw on them that much either. They're just a really solid defense all the way around. So in a divisional matchup where I actually think could be a lower scoring week than some people think, I'm going to go with the Vikings here as a startable defense, must-start defense off of the bye. And the Detroit Lions are flexible, but I will tell you this. Let me just tell you. The Lions defense, they're so banged up, and it goes past Aiden Hutchinson. And obviously, Aiden Hutchinson, that's a big deal for him to miss because they don't have a consistent pass rush anymore. Their defense is banged up on the front end, and it's banged up on the back end as well. Like, the Lions do have their own set of injuries. Aaron Jones is likely to play in this game as well. We got that update before we started filming. The Lions defense is not my favorite play, but based on the fact that they've been tough against quarterbacks and tough against the run, I do think the Lions can be played because they haven't been the worst defense in fantasy. The Tennessee Titans at the Buffalo Bills is our next matchup here. And the Bills defense is my number one defense of the week. Now, that might end up being the number two defense because the Broncos got a defensive touchdown in that game. Actually had two. But the Bills defense is fantastic this week. They're taking on the Tennessee Titans. The Titans themselves, they don't have any major injuries offensively, but they have Will Levis. Like, that's like the greatest gift to any defense. He is like Santa Claus. Like, that dude is just giving away the ball as a Christmas present. He puts it in wrapping paper and hands it to the defense, and they open it up and they say, "Thank you, Will. I appreciate it." It's just an embarrassment, actually. What Will Levis is turning the ball over, ruining game for the Titans. The Bills defense, while banged up and while Von Miller is suspended in this game, I'm playing the Bills defense. You can't convince me otherwise. The Titans defense, I'm just not going to play them. I mean, the Bills offense is explosive. Sometimes they have good weeks, sometimes they don't. But the Titans defense is just not very good in fantasy football. I actually think their real-life defense is actually pretty solid. Their fantasy defense, they're just not getting turnovers. They're not getting enough sacks. Their defense is banged up here. L'Jarius Sneed, the lockdown corner, he's questionable. And Amari Cooper is expected to make his debut in Buffalo. This is just an by all accounts, stay away from the Titans defense this week. The Miami Dolphins at the Indianapolis Colts are our next matchup here. The Colts defense still remains a start. They dropped just a couple spots because a couple defenses rose up, but the Colts defense is definitely still, in my opinion, a start. Because for me, it's like, okay, is Tua back? If he's not, then wake me up when he's back. I mean, seriously, this offense can't do anything. without Tua Tagovailoa. It's not a secret to anybody. So while I don't think the Colts defense is that particularly good, what I do understand is that they can get a lot of sacks. They sometimes have 4 sack games that they could get some turnovers. So I think it's going to happen against the Dolphins. I don't care if they're off a bye week. The Dolphins defense is playable. I will give them that. I prefer the Colts by a long shot because the Dolphins is just, they're not good enough offensively to sustain drives. They're not going to hit a big play. They're not sustaining a drive down the field. So it keeps their defense on the field for such a long time. They're constantly losing the time of possession battle week to week. And in addition to that, the Dolphins defense is banged up as well. And Jonathan Taylor has been ruled out in this game. And it's Anthony Richardson. That's what keeps them in play because Anthony Richardson is just very turnover prone. So I am okay with playing the Dolphins defense. They're not my favorite play. I think I'd play the Patriots defense over the Dolphins, but that's basically around the area that they're at for me. The Seattle Seahawks at the Atlanta Falcons here. The Falcons defense is definitely not a must start, but they're definitely playable 100%. And listen, it's not because they're going to give up tons of points. It's not because they're going to hold the Seahawks to very little points. I think it's actually going to be a shootout. I really do think this has the potential to be a really high-scoring game. But the Seahawks, they are very, very prone to mistakes. I mean, Geno Smith's throwing picks. They're fumbling the ball. Like, they've not played the cleanest football offensively. So the Falcons defense, they're opportunistic too. Now, Justin Simmons, their safety, and Troy Anderson, their linebacker, they're both questionable for this game. But again, even if just one of those guys misses, I still think they could get some turnovers here. Seahawks defense, I'm just not playing them. I mean, their defense is so banged up. I've changed their defense. Everybody's banged up at this point in the season. Their defense is not just banged up, they're really banged up. So that's an important identification right there because the Seahawks defense, I cannot play them, especially against an offense that is absolutely hitting their stride right now. The Houston Texans at the Green Bay Packers here, they're both playable defenses here. And listen, this is a really high over-under. If you look at Vegas, I'm expecting points. Vegas is expecting points. Both defenses are opportunistic enough, and both offenses are very capable of handing the other team the ball. Neither one of these offenses is playing super clean football. That makes them both playable. The Packers were inside my top 12 this week. Again, they bumped down a spot because a defense will go over here in a little bit. Ended up rising up big time. The Packers defense is still playable though. Listen, the Packers defense, they're so freaking good in fantasy because they're getting sacks, they're getting turnovers. And CJ Stroud, his one downfall this year, he's actually been throwing some interceptions, man. So they don't have their big downplay threat, Nico, anymore. So I think their offense is just going to struggle to get more going as far as big plays go. And I think the Packers definitely have that turnover upside along with sack potential. And the Texans defense here, they're banged up, but the Packers offense is banged up. Now, the Packers offense, like guys like Tucker Kraft, Christian Watson, Dontavian Wicks, Jaden Reed, they're banged up. I don't think any of them are going to miss as far as I've seen, but they're still banged up. So couple that with the Texans defense that's banged up. Turnovers, sacks is what they can get, and Jordan Love has thrown plenty of interceptions this year. I think these are both playable defenses, even in a high-scoring matchup. The Cincinnati Bengals at the Cleveland Browns this week. Again, I think they're both playable. I prefer the Browns over the Bengals here. We've been asked quite a bit about the Bengals this week. I'll get to them in a minute. Let me tell you why the Browns defense is very playable in this game. Number one, they actually started to have a resurgence last week against a very mistake-prone Philadelphia Eagles team. The one thing that Joe Burrow has done, he's basically thrown at least one pick per game. So he is not playing the cleanest of football here. The Browns defense is also getting the, I think, excitement back with Nick Chubb back in the lineup. Now, how does that affect the defense, right? Well, if it goes the way I think it could go against a bad Bengals defense, I think that they're going to have opportunities to get that Browns defense off the field more and keep them more fresh. And on top of all of it, Burrow's lifetime record versus the Browns, 1-5. So the Browns defense, like, I think they've played Burrow well over the years. They know what his game is like, and they know what his weaknesses are. I think the Browns defense is a decent play this week. I'd play him over the Bengals because, listen, the Bengals defense, this is just like last week with the Eagles defense. Eagles defense wasn't a bad play by any metric. I'm not trying to say they were, but they're just not like a super high upside defense because the Eagles defense sucks. The only thing they did was get sacks on Deshaun Watson last week, which everybody does. I expect the Bengals to do that. But expecting them to get a bunch of turnovers, the Browns actually played pretty clean football last week. So I just don't think the Bengals, their defense stinks. And their best performance was last week and against the Chiefs, and they just weren't amounting to much in fantasy football. So that's exactly how I feel about the Bengals. While playable, I definitely prefer the Browns playing this matchup. The Philadelphia Eagles at the New York Giants is our next matchup here, and I say the Giants defense is definitely the best play. They were inside my top 12 again. They moved down, but they are still a top 13, 14 defense for me. The Giants defense, their defense is really banged up. Like, that's the one thing that gives me pause here is that no Kayvon Thibodeau still. Brian Burns dealing with injury. They've had plenty of injuries, especially to that front seven, that's kind of like the difference maker in this matchup with a strong Philly offensive line. So that's definitely a problem for the Giants here. But the Giants are still going to be able to get turnovers and sacks against Jalen Hurts because this offense is so mistake prone. Hurts doesn't look his best. Like, let's just be actually honest with each other. He just does not look very, very good. So I think that the Giants here are a good play defensively, and I'm just not playing the Eagles. Their defense sucks, and the Giants are playing much cleaner football, and I think that with Malik Neighbors coming back, the Giants defense can score more points, and Singletary is expected to return as well, so there's going to be a little bit of a two-headed monster going on in New York with him and Tyron Tracy. I think that this offense is going to look much better this week, and I just don't think that the Philadelphia Eagles defense will be able to do good in fantasy. The Las Vegas Raiders at the Los Angeles Rams here. The Rams defense is a plug your nose and play defense. It's not because of the matchup. The matchup is excellent. The Raiders are a freaking mess. It's actually, Antonio Pierce is a disgrace. I'm willing to say that. He's a disgrace. The Raiders defense, I mean, their offense is such a mess. Their defense is a mess too. The Rams is such a plug your nose and play defense this week because they stink too. The Rams defense for fantasy hasn't been good the last several years. I mean, their defense honestly has been atrocious in fantasy. But again, this Raiders offense, Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew, whichever one, they both throw interceptions. Like, this is a bad football team. No Jacoby Myers again. They've got nothing. I mean, they have nothing going for them. And the Raiders defense, conversely, like, Max Crosby's still banged up. This is just not a team you want to mess with. I'm not playing the Raiders, especially with the Cooper Kupp potential return this week. I don't think the Rams are going to be struggling to score touchdowns here off the bye week and getting a little bit healthier. The Carolina Panthers at the Washington Commanders this week. You don't play either defense. I mean, neither defense is good enough to be played in fantasy football, and both offenses can score. You just want to stay away from both these defenses. That's a really easy decision to make. The Kansas City Chiefs at the San Francisco 49ers is our next matchup, and it's a tough one because both defenses are definitely playable in fantasy. The 49ers is a startable option. I would play them over the Patriots. I'd play them over the Browns. You know, teams like that, I would play them over. You know, the one thing that gives me pause, I will say, is that the 49ers defense, they're still banged up, but they have just been overcoming the injuries to be so good in fantasy that it makes me want to play them. The one thing that really gives me pause is that the Chiefs, with Andy Reid as head coach, they're really good off the bye week. They've been historically really good. So it makes me very cautious to do it. It's in San Francisco, and their defense is playing lights out football right now. And Mahomes does throw interceptions this year. He's actually throwing a decent amount of interceptions, so there's good opportunity here for the 49ers. The Chiefs defense, I'm just going to sit him this week. There are injuries on the 49ers offense. Like, Debo's been limited this week in practice. Jordan Mason, his status is up in the air. I'm going to just stay away from him this week because the Chiefs defense hasn't been great in fantasy this year, and they're just in a situation where the 49ers are definitely a potent offense that could score points. I'm just going to stay away. The New York Jets at the Pittsburgh Steelers this week. The Jets defense is the defense I've been talking about all day. That totally moved up for me in fantasy. The Jets defense is obviously a pretty good defense in fantasy. They've just had a couple bad weeks in this season, but if you look at them, over the most part for the last 2 or 3 years, they've been a really good play. What changed it all was Russell Wilson starting this game. I mean, this is as a Steelers fan, I don't want to get into it because it's just going to make me really, really mad. It's going to make me really, really mad. But the Jets defense has such a great opportunity this week. Russell is not going to be able to move this ball any better. It's going to be worse than it was with Justin Fields because he can't push the ball down the field. And when the pocket breaks down, which by the way it will, he can't run. So it's like the Jets are going to get sacks. They might get a turnover. Like and they won't put up points. The Steelers won't put up points. This is a good play this week. The Steelers defense is a high-end playable defense still, though. They moved down for me as well because of the Devontae Adams addition and because I just think that the Jets are going to win time of possession here in a big way. Now, the one big thing for the Steelers defense is they're still banged up, but they're getting Alex Highsmith back, their pass rusher opposite TJ Watt, which is a big deal for the Steelers. The Steelers defense is definitely playable this week, but obviously with the addition of Devontae Adams, they're going to be much more lethal through the air. And it makes me hesitant to do it, but Rodgers has been prone to interceptions this year, not much like years past. So the Steelers defense, they're good. Rodgers has been tossing interceptions. The opportunity is still good here for the Steelers to be a playable defense. I'll tell you the one thing Rodgers will do on Sunday night is he's going to get more than 0.5 total yards in this game. That's what his projection is on Underdog right now, and you've got to hit the higher on it. So if you haven't taken advantage of Underdog yet, go down in the comments, grab the link that's there, and use code FN to sign up for Underdog, where they'll give you 50% deposit match up to $1,000 of bonus cash, and you'll be able to take advantage of the sweat-free projection for Aaron Rodgers this week. The Baltimore Ravens at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This is a Monday night game, the first Monday night game of two. Hate these. Why do they do this? Why do they do doubleheaders on Monday night? I'm playing the Ravens defense in a lot of situations. They're still a pretty high-end play. I'd play the Steelers over the Ravens still personally, but I'd play the Ravens over the Patriots. Look, the Ravens defense, they're not good in fantasy. There's no question about this one. But Lamar's record versus the NFC is so unbelievable. It's so unheard of. And they don't just beat them. They blow NFC teams out a lot of times. And Baker has been prone to interceptions here. And Mike Evans may not play in this game. He tweaked his leg in practice this week. That's not been a good sign for anybody who's tweaked their leg in practice during the week for them to play the following week. That's never a good sign. So Mike Evans may not play. They may be without their number one wide receiver. They've got Godwin, obviously, and a couple running backs that are good. But the Ravens defense, I think they're going to do much better than expected this week, especially when you factor in the turnover effect, which Baker Mayfield does have. And I'm not playing the Bucs defense. You can't pay me to play them. I mean, that is just a ridiculous... It's a ridiculous offer to play them, honestly, because the Bucs defense is not very good as is. They did well against the Saints last week. They got a defensive touchdown. But the Bucs defense, they're still banged up. And again, the Ravens coming to town is the last thing I want to play a defense against. The Los Angeles Chargers at the Arizona Cardinals, the last Monday night game of the week. And I'm playing the Chargers defense, 100%. Marvin Harris Jr. is practicing. I don't know if he's going to go yet. Michael Wilson, their number 2, he's questionable in this game. Chargers defense has been largely, for the most part, really good in most scoring formats. And I think that the Chargers defense is definitely in good position this week because, again, they're going up against an offense that's so hot and cold, and you don't know what to expect from them on a week-to-week basis. So I do think the Chargers are a good play, and the Cardinals here, I'll say they're a decent play. They're a decent playable option here because Quentin Johnston and Ladd McConkey, they're both questionable in this game. So they're definitely playable this week, and I wouldn't go out there and shoot for this one, but the Cardinals defense can be played in certain situations. So let me know how your lineup is looking for this weekend. If you want to see where all these defenses ranked in my top 12 defenses this week, click on this video right here.